folks, Ariel over here at Nyth, where today we are doing another canning project. I am making spaghetti sauce. These are not my tomatoes, as you can probably guess, because one cannot grow tomatoes in this part of the world without a heated greenhouse or being able to bring them indoors, and I don't have either of those setups. Besides, even if I could get one plant to survive and be able to bring it inside and all of that, it wouldn't do me a whole lot of good, because what I really want tomatoes for is projects like this. I have 100 pounds here of tomatoes. I drove over to the neighboring state, to a local farm over there, about 90 miles from here. That's about the closest place one can actually grow tomatoes, because it's warmer, it's downhill, it's a lot lower in elevation, all that good stuff. So, whatever, supported my local-ish farmers and bought 100 pounds of their tomatoes. And I'm going to make them in spaghetti sauce, and that should last me for the rest of the year. Now, before you think that sounds like an awful lot of spaghetti sauce, or you think I don't even like spaghetti, I also use the same sauce if I want a pizza sauce, if I want any kind of marinara sauce, if I want tomato soup, like with a grilled cheese sandwich, something like that. I just love the flavor of this, and I use it for all of those things. So while I call it spaghetti sauce, it's my all-purpose tomato sauce, and I should have enough when I'm done here to last me the whole rest of the year. So I think this video is going to end up being two parts, just for the length. One on making the sauce, because you can certainly make a small batch of this, or even a large batch, and just freeze it or eat it all fresh or whatever, and then a separate video on actually canning it. So, what I have going on over here is a batch that I already have cooked down. So this recipe is for a 20-pound batch of tomatoes. You can certainly do less, of course, cut it in half and do a 10-pound batch, or a 5-pound batch if you cut it in quarters, and so on. But this started out in both kettles, and you can see the difference between the cooked down tomatoes and the fresh ones. It finally shrank enough I could get it all into that one, so I can get a second batch going into these kettles. Now, the way I do this sauce saves a ton of time compared to most sauce recipes I've seen, because as you can see, I'm actually quartering these tomatoes because they're fairly large, but I just want to get some exposed surface area here so that they can start cooking down. You could put them in here whole. You'd probably just need to add a little moisture to get them started cooking, because as soon as they start, plenty of liquid is going to cook out of the tomatoes. That is not a problem. But to get them going, we need some juice, so I find it easiest to just often cut them in half, but some of these, like I said, are pretty large, so I'm doing quarters or thirds just to be able to get the batch going. Now, I use a Victoria strainer. I think there's another brand that makes something similar, but I'll link down below to the one I use. But that allows me to put almost everything in here basically whole. My onions, my garlic, my tomatoes, and if you look up most sauce recipes like this, you will find that they tell you how to dunk the tomatoes in hot water and then in cold water to pull the skins off and so on. I do not do any of that because my strainer is going to take care of, there's occasionally just a little crack there at the top edge of the tomato, and sometimes bacteria can get in there. It's like a little scab. Anyway, I just think it's much faster. If you don't have a strainer and don't want to get one, if you're going to make any volume of sauce, I've been using this same one since, I don't know, my parents had it, I think, when I was born. I have a second one now, but they're still using the same one. So I have 30-something years experience with this one, and I think it is totally worth it if you're going to do anything more than like a single meal's worth of sauce at once. Not to mention I also use it for applesauce and other things. But even if I only used it for tomatoes, I would think it's worthwhile investment. So I'll show you how that goes. But that's why I'm putting my tomatoes in here pretty close to whole. And now that if I want to get some real juice going, I can kind of give one a squeeze there, if you don't squirt yourself. But now that I'm up here toward the top of my kettle, I can kind of just do full halves, because the juice is going to start cooking out of the bottom, and that'll take care of getting it going. So, you would do actually the exact same thing here if you want to make tomato paste, tomato juice. Those are usually just unflavored tomato products, so you would just stop here with the tomatoes that I'm doing right now and not add any of the seasonings that I'm going to do in 1 second. If you wanted to make tomato juice instead, for instance, and tomato juice turns into tomato paste basically by evaporating most of the water out of it and making it thicker. So this was about 20 pounds of tomatoes. My bowl weighed a little more than 20, so I'm gonna leave those last couple for the next round. I've already got more tomatoes washed over there in the sink that I will be doing another round with as soon as I can get this batch off my stove. And so people often ask, well, can you even cook in a tiny house kitchen and all of that? Yes, absolutely. If you've been around here for any length of time, I do live in an off-grid tiny house, and I cook everything, including doing canning and baking from scratch and so on. Very possible. This is easier if you have canning in any kind of bulk is always easier if you have a bigger stove and bigger kettles. Even growing up with like a full-size stove, most canning was done outside on a double or triple burner propane stove, where you just screw a little propane tank on, and with 20 to 30 quart stock pots. Someday I will probably have that again in my life. These are not 30 quart stock pots, so I'm just doing more smaller batches. If you've got at least a 20 quart pot, I think you can do one full batch in each pot. Again, if you don't want to do stuff on this scale, you don't want to make a whole year's worth of spaghetti sauce in a day, this same recipe I think you'll love. Just divide it by, a quarter and make 5 pounds of tomatoes into sauce and have one meal and put a little bit in the freezer to eat for another meal. So I want to get my tomatoes cooking down here, and I'm going to do my best to get all 3 of these kettles on here. It's a snug fit. This is only a 20-inch stove. Turn those on. Oh, wrong burner. You want to start with the heat a little bit low, just so you don't burn them until the moisture starts cooking out. And you can add a little water, but I want to evaporate water later, so I want to avoid doing that if I can to get it going, because as soon as they start to heat up, lots and lots of liquid is going to come out of the tomatoes. Now, this is one whole batch, even though it's in 2 kettles, because I can't fit it in one. So I am going to do kind of divide this by this, and by the time I run it through the strainer, it'll mix back together, so I don't have to worry about that being even portions. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm going to add garlic. These are all my littlest garlic cloves. When I went through the garlic that's hanging out there at Cure, I picked any of the kind of smaller heads and used them for this, because as you can see, I did pull the dirt off of them, but these are, full cloves, not peeled or anything. And I'm going to use a cup of garlic cloves. This is 4 cups. So I'm going to use about the top quarter of that for this batch. I'll use this whole jar of garlic by the time I'm done, because with 20-pound batches and 100 pounds of tomatoes, I'm making 5 batches of this. But I've added a cup of garlic. Then I want to add bay leaves. Some of you guys might actually live where bay leaves grow. I do not. I want 7 or 8 of these, so that's 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's do the 8th one in there, one more little one into that pot. Again, these batches are going to get thoroughly mixed, so if the seasonings aren't perfectly evenly divided, that is just fine. Oregano, I want 7 tablespoons. 8 tablespoons would be half a cup. So 8 tablespoons would be half a cup, so I'm doing just under half a cup. So that's a half cup measure. I like plenty of my seasonings, so I'm going to dump a little more than half in there, the rest into that one. I try to use my own dried oregano, but I only can grow so much here because it really likes a warmer climate. So I bought some as well for making sauce so it wouldn't run out. And here's a quick, fun comparison. Check out the difference in color there. The glass jar that's brighter green That is stuff I dried a full year ago. So this is a year old. This is stuff brought fresh from a grocery store like a day ago. So imagine how old this is to be that brown if this is a year old. And that's why I try to grow as many of my own spices as I can, just for reference. And even if you guys don't like gardening otherwise, and even if you only have like a deck or a sunny window, you can grow a pot of herbs and they will be much better than anything you can buy. You're going to do some pepper here, about a tablespoon. So again, part in one pot, part in the other. Going to do basil, one of my very favorite herbs. Again, I want about half a cup, close to that. And again, there's no way I can grow enough basil. This, I bought some fresh leaves to use for this, and people say, well, why don't you just grow a pot in the house and you could use it like that? I don't think those people realize the volume at which I generally use herbs, because I am going to use this entire thing in a day. And this is why I don't grow pots inside. For one, I don't really get enough sunshine in my windows to keep a sun-loving plant like basil happy in the winter. But I also would use the entire plant every time I cooked, and so that doesn't really do me any good. So I'm able to add some fresh basil there, and then I'm going to add some dried as well, just because my access to fresh basil is a little limited. So basil, oregano, that's the main spices. Bay leaves. Oh, I'm going to do some salt. Let's do about 3 tablespoons of salt. So that's 1, 2, 3. And that is all of our seasoning. Oh, forgot one very important thing, onions. Okay, onions, I want about 8 cups of onions. These I did kind of peel the outside off. These are from my garden, just to get rid of some of the actual soil. Of course, eating a little bit of soil is very good for you, but I don't want to eat massive amounts of it in my spaghetti sauce. So even ones like that can go in whole. But if you have a really clean onion where there's no dirt, soil left on the outside, you can totally put all the skin and all right in here, because the same strainer that I discussed earlier is going to filter anything that's like crunchy that you wouldn't want to eat out. And so cooking all that in here is just great for the flavor. So this is kind of some of my littlest onions, kind of like with the garlic. This is a good place to use up some of the ends of my white onions, which don't store as well. And, you know, just some small ones, because the really small ones that for whatever reason didn't want to grow as well, they just don't tend to store as long through the winter. So, get our onions in there. And then this is all just going to sit here and simmer. Just like this pot that looks the much darker, richer red has been doing. That one's simmered down to a lot of the, first all the juice comes out of the tomatoes, and then the juice starts to evaporate out of there. And this pot is basically done, and I am ready to go strain it while these cook down. So a few more in there to make that a full 8 cups. That'll be ready for my next batch. So that's going to simmer away, and we're going to take this actually outside because it's easier to clean up any splatters out there. And we're going to run this through the strainer and show you what that part looks like. See how that's starting to cook down, and I'm getting a lot of juice there into the bottom, and I can start stirring it. It will continue to cook down even more, but I got 3 or 4 inches of juice in there as is. Okay, outside now. This is my little strainer. I've just kept its original box because it's a pretty handy place to store it in. And just do a quick put this together. There's some staining in the plastic there from the many times I've run brightly colored foods through it, like tomatoes or carrots or things like that. So to put this together, probably very self-explanatory. You've got that sieve, you've got the spiral that sucks the veggies through there, a little rubber seal that tries to help keep it from leaking. You want to see it? Yeah, it's not for you, actually. A little spring that goes in there, that whole thing, its way through that hole, and then this strainer part locks on just like that. This little screw goes down to keep it from unexpectedly sliding off when you didn't want it to. This little splatter guard pops right on there. That goes in the top. The handle sticks in this side. If you're inventive like my younger brothers were, when it somehow got to, in the course of things, being their job to do the straining of tomatoes and spaghetti sauce and applesauce, I know for a fact it is possible to hook a power drill into that and use that to run it instead of turning by hand if you like. I've never minded the turning by hand, but some guys seem to much prefer the operation of using a power tool for that. That's just a possibility if you want. I think they actually may sell a motor design just to run it too. So I'm going to just, again, use this outside because it can make a little bit of splatter when you're doing something bright red like tomato juice. That used to push everything through. And this, put that on first before the white part pops right on there and keeps the waste product going away. So that's the setup. Let's run some stuff through it. So this bench here is it's normally my food serving bench if I have friends over and we have a meal outside, and it works great for clamping that onto. I'm going to simply ladle my cooked down sauce into the basin on top here. I've added a container to catch the waste that is going to not actually be wasted. It's going to go into the compost once I've squeezed everything I want to eat out of it. And a bowl to catch what you can already see running in there, the juice. So you don't want to go quite clear to the top with this. You do want to make sure that's screwed on tight because you don't want to drop a big hot bowl of this stuff onto your self or something else and lose it. Now the way this runs, you just start turning there. You can see how the pulp speeds up. The most thin liquid comes through fastest. Once it's going down there, you can kind of gently give it some encouragement. We'll start to get some of the more pulpy stuff through as well. And then we are going to go back inside and cook this down to being a little thicker. But I'm just going to run that whole kettle through here and show you what we do next. You can see out here is coming the skins, seeds, bay leaves, onion peels, garlic peels, any of that stuff. That's why it's so quick for me to throw it all together to cook, because I didn't have to take the time to remove anything like that. I've got that batch run through. We are going to actually do this pulp a second or even third time, because you can see how this has a lot of juice and some of the thickness, you know, comes through on that end, but we want to get more of that. You see how the pulp coming out the poop end there is already looks like there's a lot less liquid in it, and you can see how much thick stuff is coming through here. Now the strainer here does have multiple different screens, but I put that metal screen on top of the red thingy for doing different things like grapes or berries or apples or whatever. This tomato screen is the one I use the most though. And you can see how it's letting little bits of, you know, the herbs, the basil and stuff, you know, come through the holes on the screen. But all of my peels and any of the woody, fibery stuff is working out that end. And I will link to this thing down below. It really, guys, I use this a lot. Not like a lot of days a year like most of my kitchen tools, but the days when I use it, it is so worth having, because I use it for doing various berry juices, I use it for applesauce, I use it for tomatoes, and it just, I would way rather sit here and do this than try to scald and peel all my tomatoes, peel all of my onions and dice them, peel all of my garlic, and so this just really speeds up the whole operation. And I'm just going to keep doing this for a bunch more till I have 5 batches through here, and then we're going to can it all. Okay, so now we have brought our sauce in from the strainer outside, and I've put it back in the pot here now that all the stems and peels and skins and all that are out. And I've been simmering it for a little while. It actually simmered down, evaporated a lot of moisture. It's fairly steamy in here even with the windows open. But it's a cold day, so that it actually feels fine. And then I added a little more in and so on. So I've been simmering it down just to evaporate some liquid to make it a little thicker. Now, how much you need to do that kind of depends a little bit on the kind of tomatoes you use. There are tomatoes that are more saucy and less just watery. Those are better for making sauces, but you can use any tomato. If it's just more watery, you just keep evaporating moisture till it gets thick. That's basically all there is to it. And then right here at the end, I'm going to add a little tomato paste. I'm going to add 2 of these 12-ounce cans just to thicken it up a little more. I could achieve the same thing by continuing to simmer it, you know, for more hours to evaporate more moisture. I just don't want to go that long, and then I lose more of my total volume. So adding a couple cans of paste just makes it nice and thick without having to do that. And how much you want to add depends a little bit on how thick you want this to end up being, and like I said, the kind of tomatoes you start out with. If you're wanting this to be like a pizza sauce, you probably want that a little thicker so it didn't run off the pizza. So that would require either more paste or more time evaporating. For spaghetti sauce and tomato soup and most of the stuff I use this for, I like it just a little thinner, but that's kind of a matter of personal taste. You do not want to add this paste before you're done simmering it down because it makes it thicker and more prone to burning. So I'm only, you know, like sticking onto the bottom. So I'm adding this once I think I've evaporated as much moisture out as I am going to do. So we're going to give that a minute to warm up and kind of dissolve into the rest of that sauce. There we go. And now the other things I've got here. As you can see, I've been canning already because I have, you know, multiple batches of this stuff. So these are all done jars. These are sealed. You can see there's no clicking there anymore. You could hear them snap when they came out of the canner. I've got the canner warm here. I've got freshly washed hot jars. Got my sauce simmering hot. And once I stir this and there's no little lumpies, we're going to fill our jars and put this in the canner. So that's everything about how you make the sauce. If you weren't canning, you would just stop at that point if you wanted to make like an individual batch or just one little kettle full and, you know, put some in some containers in the freezer to use for later or whatever the case would be. You could just stop right there, and I really think this would be the best flavored spaghetti sauce you've ever had in your life. I know I could buy it. I have never ever been happy with, and I know some of that's just what you get used to and what your mouth is expecting, but I have never ever been able to buy one that I really liked the taste of from anybody. So that looks good. Hi folks, Ariel over here. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time watching these videos. Hopefully you found something beautiful, educational, interesting, peaceful, relaxing, or useful while you were here. If so, find more videos here, subscribe so you don't miss any updates, and if you like what you found here, feel free to like and share away so that others can benefit as well. You all have a wonderful day.